Hello, Internet. Happy Friday, May 1st. Happy May Day. Hope you guys are all having a wonderful week and looking forward to a beautiful weekend with your family or with yourself. Yeah, I hope you have a lot of nice plans, good weather. Hopefully, here in Vegas, it's already getting quite hot. Um, but can't complain. Gotta be grateful for the sunshine and all the other wonderful things that come along with it. So, today's May Day. I'm not so familiar with May Day. Here in the States, we don't celebrate May Day, but I did a little bit of research and decided that I want to talk about May Day today and what it means and celebrate it in our own sense uh, here in the live stream. So, yeah, May Day is a pretty long-standing spring festival celebrated in many European communities. So that's why, it's not really an American holiday. But the holiday itself is related, started out as like a spring festival, like many of the spring festivals that we see throughout the world. But now it has come to represent the celebration of labor and the acknowledgement of labor and the rights of people engaged with labor. So that's what I'm going to talk about today because that is very common in the tea world. We sit and drink tea and enjoy it, and there actually is a great deal of labor that goes into making tea. Not only, importing and packing and selling that tea, blending, and, all the other labor that happens on this side that we're quite accustomed with, but the labor of actually growing and making the tea. And the type of labor I want to talk about is in kind of the mass labor. Labor can be something, really kind of singular and intimate. You just labor for yourself and for the things that you produce for yourself. That is a legitimate form of labor. But I think in the context of May Day and what it's celebrated now, this is like labor in business, labor in the mass production of goods, which tea is, really kind of one of our most laborious products in the world. So, yeah, I want to talk about labor. If you guys have any questions in regards to the labor of tea, please feel free to ask away in the text in the comments, and I will be more than happy to try to answer whatever you have. I know a lot of people have questions usually revolving around like direct trade, because that is not direct trade, I'm sorry, fair trade is the right term, because that's a certification that does its branding and what it encompasses in that brand and the trust that's been built around that brand a lot of times is associated with labor. The fair payment to the farmer, which, the farmer is the one doing the labor. And so, yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm sure you have questions on that. But first, I'll get drinking my tea. I'll get going on making my tea. My very simple labor here of just making tea. There's much more labor involved with recording and broadcasting these live streams than there is in my making of the tea. So I guess that can be celebrated too, and to some degree. Yeah, here we go. Industry update. I guess I had it up the whole time. So yeah, in regards to the status currently with labor, there is an issue, just like there's an issue here with unemployment filing. And on a good note, on a positive note here stateside, the payroll protection loans that were part of the CARES Act in response to supporting the community in this time of difficulty of shutdown. Um, Many businesses are starting to see those funds come in, so that is good news. So if you are a tea professional, or even tea service professional, and the company that you work for has had to close down, lay off employees, the good news is that a lot of those funds that were released for supporting small business are starting to be seen by those small businesses. So you may be hired again. So these loans, what's really incredible about that whole system is that the loans will be forgiven, meaning the business doesn't have to pay them back if the business can show that they kept employed the same amount of people prior to the shutdown. So it is in their best interest, their incredibly best interests, to hire their employees back, even if those employees can't work, like there's no business to run. If that business proves to the bank, proves to the lender that they employed, that those funds were actually used for payroll, they don't have to pay it back. So yeah, that's good news. The kind of interesting counter to this that says a lot about the status of labor here in the States, and this is more associated with more of like service industry type labor workers, is that in some cases those workers are making more money on unemployment than they were through their paychecks, through the company, through their job prior to the shutdown. Which is going to be difficult for businesses to attract their employees back if their employees are making more money through unemployment than they were if they're working. So that's kind of an issue, a no-brainer for the employee. Of course, we want to make sure that people have are very well taken care of and have things that they need. But it does say a lot about the status of our service industry and that whole category of business that, it is a necessity. Restaurants and cafes, they are total necessities in our world, but they're also a very challenging category of business from the business owner's perspective, for them to hire employees and treat them with dignity and respect, and the distribution of the value that's created from those types of business is a little off if unemployment is going to be paying those workers more favorably than the business itself. And this is not a direct jab at those business owners. I know that they're dealing with their own challenges in marketing and all the other costs associated with running a business, that oftentimes the labor ends up being the category of expenses. How sad is that we consider people to be like a category of expenses. Hi, Gabby. Good to see you. I'm good. I'm just about to enjoy some white tea from Nepal. Beautiful white tea made with a lot of artisanal labor. And talking about labor today, because today is May Day. And although it started out as a spring festival, it now is a holiday in certain communities that acknowledges the status and situation of individuals engaged in labor. So, yeah, I'm going to be talking about tea industry labor. So, yeah, currently uh, everybody is challenged with keeping their payroll up, with keeping their employees happy and taken care of. And, in some cases, the government is directly helping those people, which is good that those opportunities are there. Unfortunately, in places like India, which is a very laborious source of tea, the government is not so involved in supporting those workers, and has kind of left it up to the employers of the industry. So the tea plantations, the tea factories, other tea businesses, leaving it up to them to make sure that all of their laborers are supported. A little bit of this. Not a problem. It's very organic, so I'll be able to eat it. This nice, beautiful leaf set. Go. You can see. You can see. Let's see. Yeah. Beautiful. Pristine. A lot of labor to keep this in such a pristine condition. A lot of hard work and attention to detail. And let's not forget the labor of the plant itself to produce this, the protection of the leaves during the winter time. That's a lot of work. And then also the release of energy to produce this shoot, because this is a first flush shoot. This is like the very first growth that came out after the winter and the spring of last year. So this is not this year's tea. This is last year's spring tea. It's an enormous amount of energy required by the plants to release this shoot and to grow it. And a lot of that energy is coming from the sun. So thank you to the sun. These are all integral parts of the labor of tea. I know we're talking mostly about the human labor, but I also think it's good to think about the whole picture and all the elements involved. Hello, Milan. Yeah, it's backwards. I have to. I should rewrite this to be backwards, because that's right. Everything is flipped on these like selfie cameras. That'll be a challenge. I've got all the time in the world right now, so I could definitely work on that. That'd be a lot of fun. Or what I could do is just have a mirror right there and the letter on that side, so that it would show to the camera a mirror reflection of the words. Yeah, so everything that I've read so far from India, what does it say? Oh dear, I'll take it down. You can't even see it. So this is just directing people. Like it's mostly appropriate for whenever I have large group of people in the tea room at the tea table. It directs you where to go see the video with all the other people speaking and whatnot. But I'll take it down so that way you guys can focus on my tea service. Yeah, so the media and anything that you can read about the current situation of labor in India is that the estates and the individual businesses are still responsible for paying their employees. I haven't seen any direct follow-up of of what that actually means and what the status of payment actually is.
Acknowledgement
because
of labor.
I don't work directly with any of these large estates, so it's not really applicable for the people that we work with. But, the individuals that I have spoken to are all very small operations, and, they're taking care of their own employees and their own workers because they're like a small, tight knit community. For the larger estates, I don't know. I know, like, even prior to, I'm drinking a white tea from Nepal. And you can see, actually, some of it came out of my Gaiwan. You can see how clean the liquor is, how beautiful, smooth it is. A lot of labor to make a tea like this, to keep the leaves so pristine, because there's no kilgreen on a white tea. There's no kilgreen, so there's no opportunity to denature the browning enzymes. But then you also don't want to like bruise or hurt the leaf, because then that would instigate more oxidation, which you don't want in a white tea. You want to keep it as unbruised and unoxidized as possible before it dries enough to stop the oxidation. So, from the harvesting to the transporting of the leaf to the factory, there has to be a lot of, delicate handling of the leaf, which takes, a lot of work. It seems like a simple thing, but it does take a lot of work. The least amount of labor and the more machines you have involved, and the more like mass labor involved, the more likelihood there is of damage happening to the leaf and for the pristine character of this tea to be lost. So yeah, that's what I'm drinking now. Nice tea, very soft, very light sweetness to it. And that's all because of the undamaged leaf. Like, if there was more damage to this leaf and oxidation, there's a higher chance of tannins to be formed. And tannins in tea give a kind of like unpleasant bitterness to the tea that wouldn't be good for, a delicate tea like this. So, tea like this takes more effort, has more value, and ultimately has a higher value in the market, a higher price in the market. Whether or not that value always makes it back to the labor is the question, and that's the whole origin and source of why we have holidays like May Day, to acknowledge the situation, and yeah, of course, the distribution of value throughout the value chain. Sorry, my phone is buzzing. Someone's trying to give me a call. So yeah, I don't know the current status of payments making their way to the tea farm workers in places like India. Hi, Pen. Good to see you. Yeah, if anybody has heard, or if there's anybody that does work within the tea sector and would like to give an update from your perspective, I'd be more than happy to hold space for that and hear that and share it with our community, of course. Not much tea is being produced. Only up until about last week, the whole country of India was on a lockdown, so there wasn't anything being produced. But now tea factories and tea farms can be up to 50% capacity of their labor. So, for instance, if they had 200 workers in the past, then they have... Good to see you. Yeah, this whole live streaming thing is new for everybody, Pan, so don't worry. You're not the only one. But we need something to do right now. We need some inspiration and some light, so I'm sharing it. Yeah, I'd be interested. They're not taking much from your grandmother's plantation. So is your grandmother's plantation at full capacity, at full production capacity right now? Or has there been limitations of how much labor she can have out working? I don't know the specifics on the lockdown in Sri Lanka. I just know about India. And speaking of India, I now want to talk a little bit about the state of labor and how India's minimum wage law works. This is always really fascinating and blows everybody's mind. Um, and this is only regarding labor that are employed by the tea producer. There is a lot of labor involved in tea, specifically Indian tea, that is completely unaccounted for in any kind of minimum wage representation by the government. So you said that there are a lot of limitation, but there's pretty much now full lockdown. She's a very small operation, her and my uncles and a few workers. I see. So they're just working at like a lower capacity. But the market is a struggle too. So the commodity tea market over the past month has significantly dropped about 40% in price. So it's almost half the price. So these your grandmother is probably already used to getting a low price for her tea. You know, anywhere between $2 and $5 a kilo, and now they're only able to get like $1.20 to $4 a kilo even for the high quality stuff. So it's kind of a dead end situation to produce a product that has such a low market price. You have a friend that has a tea company in India and works directly with tea farms. Yeah, I mean, your friend probably knows all of these things that I'm speaking about. My energy seems low today. Maybe. Yeah, that's interesting you point that out. Um, I didn't go for my run yet. I plan to go after I finish this, so maybe that accounts for my energy level. Um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I haven't drank enough tea. That's the issue. This is also the end of the week, so it's been a long week. It's been a very long week. Um, and I'm not talking about the most happiest of things today. Usually I'd want to be talking about something happier, but this is, last night I just Google searched May Day because I remembered like seeing, what was it, when I lived in the Caribbean actually. May Day was like a big celebration. The kids, did a big program with the schools, and yeah, I just like wanted to know a little bit more what May Day was, and was really, shocked to learn that it is a very like labor focused and labor acknowledging holiday associated with the Spring Festival, and the first. Drink more tea. Okay. All right. I'll take your orders. I'm definitely not tired. I've been sleeping really well. I don't know about you guys, but like I've been sleeping like a charm this entire, stay at home order time. At least 8 hours a night. Sometimes much, much more. So I'm definitely not tired. I did have a big lunch right before I came over here. So, maybe I'm feeling a little lagged from that and just need some tea. Used to hate right pour. Yeah, well, maybe you were right. Maybe you just didn't drink good right pour prior to being introduced to friends that can get the good stuff for you. Because um, right pour can be done very badly, and most of it is done very badly. because you need a very large processing amount. And if you don't have sanitary environment and you don't have like artisanal craft put into producing it, then yeah, it can lead to some very um, unpleasing characteristics. The most common one is kind of like a fishy smell, which is like negative for anybody. I don't think there's anybody in the world that would be like, oh, I particularly like this one because it has a really fishy aroma to it. And not good fish, like when you're evaluating the quality of a fish itself, like when you're going to the store to purchase a fish, one of the main things you want to do is smell it, right? And it should have like a light fishy aroma to it, like a subtle, more sweet aroma than fishy aroma. If it has that like rotten fish aroma, then yeah, you definitely don't want to eat that. You said it smells like a Chinese herbal shop dried fish. Oh, yeah, that's it. um, yeah. The herbal part, like, maybe some people could like that, because there are some aromas there, but I think like the fishy dried fish smell is something that's pretty negative across the board. And that happens often with ripe pu'er, because with ripe pu'er, you're essentially just like composting tea. You're taking like 3 tons of tea. So that's the first issue. You have to have at least 3 tons of tea to make a batch. So 3 tons is a lot of tea. And this is finished leaf. This is not, 3 tons of raw leaf, which is still a lot of tea. And so that means that you're going to be sourcing your tea from lots of different areas, lots of different farmers, lots of different producers. Even if it's a big factory, they may have a small field to themselves, but they're still going to be sourcing green leaf from other farms around, sometimes hundreds of farms. So you're just kind of creating a mix of all of these different teas. So, no accountability of craftsmanship and, attention to detail in that 3 tons that you're working with. And then the second thing on top of that is that you're like instigating that 3 tons of tea to create warmth, to create, a living, breathing environment, for that fermentation to happen. Which this is like making yogurt or beer, fermenting any type of food. It's the same exact concept. And we all know, even as fermenting hobbyists, we know that sanitation is like number one. Like you're not going to come out with the product that you want if you aren't using a very sanitary environment and inoculating your product with exactly the microbes that you want to be in there. And so when you're working in these big factories that are processing 3 tons of tea at one time with probably just a few workers, just a few laborers there, not a whole lot of laborers there. It's hard to keep things sanitary. It's hard for those workers to be mindful of these things that we do when we're fermenting some food, in our kitchen ourselves. So that's, it's just a very high risk tea. And most of it, especially the stuff that's making its way into the States, is not good at all. So you probably were right in your opinion of not liking ripe pu'er when you first were introduced to it. But there are a handful of vendors that are supplying good quality ripe pu'er. Sohan was talking about a lot of that yesterday in our tea talks. Speaking of food, I'm wondering how come people don't pair tea, like pu'er tea and other high-end teas, with food like they do with wine. You really can. So that's a good question. Like, people have been doing tea pairings. I've been doing tea pairings with my own classes and sessions, and have actually written about it in the past about how to set up a good pairing. Because pairings are fun, they're engaging, they're highly subjective, which makes them easy. As a curator of a pairing experience, all you really have to do is figure out some subjective perspective of making those pairings work. And there's three basic concepts of making a pairing work. Parallel, so that's whenever you have two similar things that work in harmony with each other. Contrast, which you have two different things that kind of create this contrast that actually works well. And then enhancing, so when one kind of builds upon the other to make it a fuller experience. So those are three very different experiences that, as a curator, and this is the job as a sommelier, this is the job as a curator, is just somebody that like helps introduce that subjective perspective to make that thing work. So you said right here that you found that Wuyi's pair perfectly with spicy foods like Thai Southern or Southern Chinese. Yeah, that could work. You could also make the argument that it could work with sweet foods like Shanghai's cuisine. It all depends about how you frame that perspective, because it's subjective. This is not an objective thing. Our palates and our experiences as human beings are not, like scientific instruments that can only see from one objective, calibrated view. Not to say that that would be bad. That'd be pretty cool if we were all calibrated beings. I mean, we'd be like cyborgs at that point, but it is what it is. But what we are is subjective beings that have our own perspectives. So pairings are fun, and pairings happen in the hospitality community mostly through wine. You're right. Wine and whiskey and even and cocktails have become really fun pairing experience. And those pairings are not like set in stone. Those pairings were not written in a book somewhere that restaurant owner had to follow this book to make that pairing happen. That pairing happened because the person that wrote that menu, be it the restaurant owner or the sommelier or the F&B director, whoever wrote that menu and declared that pairing, just framed that perspective for you. And so your question on why we're not seeing that with tea is the same reason why you're still being served a tea bag in many of your fine dining establishments. Tea, high quality tea, and even attention to detail on tea service has not reached hospitality just yet. We're working on it. And, a lot of this work that I'm doing is all part of that, is creating that fear of missing out, that FOMO for the hospitality community, that they are missing out on an opportunity of creating these unique experiences for their customers, such as pairings. But, for them, it always has to translate to first margin, for the food buying budget and the restaurant's budget. And then second, it has to yield, a greater tip potential for the servers. So, it works in both those ways. That's really the only way that you can get new ideas introduced into the hospitality industry. So basically, tea has to be valued more on the menu. And not just a little bit, it's not a difference of tea service, because right now in fine dining, if you order tea, it's maybe $2 or $3. Excuse me. Maybe it's only like $2 or $3 on the menu. But, even if you were to increase that if you were to double that, like let's say you double that, oh, that's good. Doubling is a good increase. That only increases it to like $6. That might work for the margin of the business, but it's definitely not going to work for the tip for the server. Because the server's tips is, anywhere between 50 and 30% of what's being sold. So 15 to 30% of a $6 tea service is, probably still not enough of an incentive for that server to upsell that experience to their customers. And because that's who's actually like at the front line, that's actually going to be doing that hard sell of that experience to the customer. It's all on the server. The menu, you can make your menu look fancy as you want, but it's the server that has to actually say, hey, would you be interested in this? And for that server to deliver that experience. So, a price point that I think would be more attractive for both of those conditions would be a $20 tea service. Now, you may say, wait, $20 for tea? Yes, because it's not just the tea leaf that you're going to be taking, just like with all other fine dining. You're going to be getting it as a educational experience. Let me see what you said. You're working on a concept for a restaurant. The food is made in conjunction with a set of tea. I do. Okay, so you said that the food menu would be set by a person familiar with the tea and the food, aka tea master. Yes, your setting, just like I said, whoever writes that menu and creates that experience or that perspective of that experience is going to be like your sommelier. And I interpreting that that's what you meant, but you say tea master here, and I would like to give my encouragement that tea master is a title that is reserved for somebody already. And that person is definitely not in a restaurant making a menu. That person is actually like growing the tea and making the tea. So, there are other terms. I mean, you could use the term tea sommelier, like that's it's an unregulated term that is already being used and already kind of understood within industry. If you want to be a bit more respectful to the certification process of sommelier, which I think in the time will come for tea education. That title and that kind of international recognition of that title is on its way. Just doesn't exist yet. But another term, and the term that I like to use is tea artist. Also an unregulated term, but it is actually quite united understanding and recognized across several different high quality tea cultures in China and Taiwan. And then now here in the States, that title is being recognized as a person that has great expertise in tea, not just in, where tea comes from and how it's made and, how to identify a tea, but also how to brew it and how to create unique experiences with the tea. So, yeah. You want it to be a 5-star tasting menu. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I don't know if the timing is right now. So here's my forecast of where fine dining is going in the future, which I have a lot of friends that, would be very sad to hear this assessment that I have. But as optimistic of a person that I am, I also am a very realistic person. And I'm optimistic that this change is not going to threaten our food. It's not going to threaten our enjoyment of very good food. I think it's actually going to increase our accessibility and enjoyment of really great food, including hospitality and service. But I think that restaurant industry has just become so oversaturated and undervalued by the consumer that the experience to go out and eat a meal at a restaurant has become such a commodity that it's like no longer special. And, I know that brings a lot more convenience to our life, that we don't have to like dirty up our kitchen and go to the grocery store and, do all those hassling things. But what we're dealing with right now and with the, immediate threat, and we're already starting to see it, of restaurants not only temporarily shutting down due to the pandemic, but permanently shutting down. And there's this like idea that like new entrepreneurs are just going to jump right in and open these restaurants. It's like, I don't think so. It's not how it works. We may see some investment, but I think the smartest investment would be into utilizing those resources in a more decentralized way, because food service hasn't been working. It hasn't been working for years. And just related to this issue of like getting good tea into the restaurant is a challenge because the servers don't make enough of a dignified living and the hard work that they offer to the restaurant, that it's what gets served in the restaurant is based off of what's going to give tips to the server. So like that itself is like a broken system. And so I think that uh, yeah, I don't think that these restaurants are all just going to like reopen with new owners and we're going to get back to normal. I think restaurant business is going to continue to be challenged, and hospitality will evolve again to a point where it is this like very high value experience, and it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to cost a lot of money for us to go and eat, and we're going to enjoy that. Like whatever we spend, like with all things that we spend a lot of money on, like we're very like connoisseur of like really enjoying that thing and really understanding that thing. And so that's how hospitality in general, not just fine dining. I mean, I really think it's only going to be, fine dining or extremely casual dining. So extremely casual that I think it should be street food. Like I really want to advocate for a movement of really delicious, nutritious, high quality ingredient cooking that's delivered in a very convenient and localized way, such as street food. Right now the government doesn't support that. It's a pain in the neck to even serve food for the community. So, I mean, there's definitely going to have to be some legislative change to support this. Like I think we should be prepared for any of these types of changes to happen quickly because, yeah, these restaurants are, they were struggling before. Like, it's not just the pandemic that's hitting the restaurants. Like they were working on slim margins already before the pandemic hit. The pandemic is just really accelerating the hemorrhaging of that whole industry. But we still need to eat. Like that's the ultimate thing. Every person in this world still needs to eat. So, the value of food service is not going anywhere. So yeah, that's my prediction on it. So, you're going to have this like very casual, affordable, accessible food, such as street food. I would love to see it manifest itself as street food. And then the other opposite end of it, dining out is going to be this very high value experience where it will be easier for tea to find its way there. And so, yeah, Pan, maybe your idea would work in those. It's not even fermented yet, your idea. Well, give it time. You'll see what happens. I don't know that. Let me look that up. Kato. Uh-huh. That looks interesting. So it's like high quality food in a casual environment. No, it is definitely in a strip mall, so that's interesting. But it does look fancy. Yeah, it looks delicious. Oh, that's beautiful. So yeah, I'd love to see this. I mean, there are so many hospitality professionals, servers, cooks, um, even sommeliers, bartenders. There are so many people that have the skill and the ability to offer value. But for each one of those individuals to become their own business owner is like, it's completely impossible. And so that's why, yeah, we had this like highly centralized hospitality industry, that it's not so empowering. Oh, it has a Michelin star. Wow. Taiwanese. Yeah, it looks beautiful. I'll watch that video later. I love Taiwanese food. Actually, the Taiwanese, like, that's the model of street food I think that we could all look towards. Like the whole night market. If you've ever been to Taiwan or seen your friend go to Taiwan, there's always at least one visit to a night market, and if you're lucky, it's every night a visit to a night market, because there's so much incredible, great, high quality food that's being made there and served there, in very casual. Chanting Pines. All right, I will. Um, and affordable, accessible. Like that's the deal too. Like whenever you go to a fine dining establishment, which is pretty much one of the only places that you can get, really fine ingredients and high quality food, like all the other more affordable food sources we have is like fast food, and that's just junk, like really not quality. A lot of times what you're paying for when you go to those places is like the rents and the marketing and, whatever other high profile, celebrity chef or whatever, corporate structure is having to support that is mostly what you're paying for. Um, you're definitely not paying for the service. Like that's your tip. Your tip is paying for the service. And so that, that's kind of, um, a bad issue, because then if tips are threatened, then your service is threatened as a business owner. The service that your employees are going to be offering is threatened if the tips aren't working for them, if there's not products that are upsellable, for that server to make a decent living. Um, and then the ingredients that they use, like they're going to be cutting corners on that. They're not going to be cutting corners on their rent. I mean, I guess the case of this um, Cato that you pointed out is getting a more affordable rent. Although I wouldn't think that the rent's so cheap, but definitely more affordable to be situated there than to be, Oceanside in Santa Monica or something, which is where, typically you'd see a restaurant of that caliber. It's all about appearance and experience versus, the quality of the ingredients. And so that's why when we go in with our teas and do a pitch to a restaurant, I've pitched all kinds of restaurants here in Vegas. And I have clients that pitch restaurants all throughout New York and LA and San Francisco and Seattle and Chicago. They go to all the fine dining establishments there and meet the chef, meet the sommeliers and the beverage directors, and they taste the tea together. And those people taste the difference and see that difference, but then they continue to choose this lower priced thing because, like there's so much, they're working on such small margins and they're in so much pressure, that it's hard for them to support, good quality products. Now, if it's guaranteed to sell, so like an expensive bottle of wine or expensive bottle of champagne or whiskey, like that's something that's a bit lower risk for that business owner to invest in because they know it will sell eventually. Like there is an acknowledged value of those types of products. We're just not at that tipping point with tea just yet. But we'll get there. Number one, juicy dumpling. That sounds great in San Gabriel. There's a lot of really great food in San Gabriel. Asian fare. Better than downtown LA, Chinatown, or, other, fancy. You mentioned Din Tai Fung, which actually we're supposed to get one here in Vegas at the Aria, I believe, but I can only imagine that launch is a little bit delayed. Dumplings are so good. And dumplings can be done really well with really good ingredients at very low overhead. Dumplings are a perfect street food type of a thing. Um, yeah, so what I was saying about like all of these like hospitality professionals that are all laid off and like not knowing where their next opportunity would be, like if they had the opportunity to make dumplings, make juicy soup dumplings out of their kitchen and sell it to like all their neighborhood, like that would just be such a win. That would be such a win. But, there's so many things working against someone from doing that. On cutting corners, Din Tai Fung is the epitome of it. It's true. Like the more corporate structure you're working with, the farther the connection between the product and the consumer is. Meaning that there's like more middlemen in that. And those middlemen a lot of times are not like even connected with the consumer that's going to be enjoying that product. So like if it's the chef or even the servers that are involved in buying the ingredients, knowing, oh, I know my customer, I interact with them every day, I know that they'll like this, but in a very corporate structure, like those two are never doing the buying. The buying is being done, by this guy in an office in New York, that's like never engaged with the customer on a face to face. So it's going to be very easy for that guy to cut corners and just look at price and just say, yep, this will work better. So that's the issue with centralized corporate, structures. And that's like a big problem in the Strip here in Vegas. You know, they have the business to support really, really good quality. And they have the talent as well. So the chefs that are working there, the servers that are working there, all the professionals working within these different dining establishments are, some of the best in the world. But the buying is like being done by this dude that, they don't even know. In some cases, they never even meet the buyer. And they're not allowed, if they found an ingredient they wanted to use themselves, there's like 10 layers of bureaucracy that they have to cut through with that centralized buyer before they can get that vendor approved and start sourcing products. So, that's one of the sources of problems with why food on the Strip is so expensive, but then, so subpar in quality. But then they don't get to go to Din Tai Fung. They don't get to take their selfie there. They don't get to post it to social media. So there's value in these things. And I think it's legitimate. I think it's respectable and legitimate for a business to know that there is an additional value that they're offering just of the experience of being there. I think it says a lot about our society that value exists. And I'll do whatever I can to try to inspire us to evolve to a higher level of consciousness where more value is appreciated in the actual product that we're consuming. Anthony Bourdain said that about Din Tai Fung. I didn't know that. I don't know if I would go as far as to say that it tastes like crap. I've eaten twice at a Din Tai Fung, and it was good. It was way too expensive. Like, the value didn't match for, Ego Chai, how you guys doing? Good to see you. I hope you guys had a beautiful spring and that you guys are staying happy there in Assam. I really enjoyed that experience visiting you guys last year. Drinking tea out of the bamboo and walking around your garden. Oh, he said that about trendy places that are hounded by tourists. Yeah. It's not worth it for me. I probably will never go eat at Din Tai Fung again. Of course, if I was with somebody and they insisted, I wouldn't be against it. But yeah, I'd rather find like a more local spot that's more chill to go eat some dumplings. So yeah, I've gotten a little off topic of what I originally wanted to talk about when I came on, but I think it's all related. Like we're talking a lot about fine dining and hospitality industry, and I am very good. Thank you for asking. Are you guys settled up near the farm? Or are you guys been spending your lockdown time in the city? Let me know. No, don't apologize, Pen. Like, I like to take the conversation where whoever's with me wants it to go. So I'm glad that we got to talk about that, and it is related to what I originally wanted to talk about with labor. I wanted to talk a bit more about labor at origin, but labor at the service point is also very important. And we're seeing those issues front and center right now with all the layoffs and with all the business closures, of this uncertainty of the skill and value of servers of tea, or even blenders and suppliers of tea, and how will the industry and the world evolve to continue to appreciate that service and that labor. um, I don't have the answers to it, but I just wanted to talk about it. Today is May Day, and it's a day to acknowledge those types of things. So, yeah, anybody that has ideas, you're welcome to comment or reach out. Let me know what you think about that. But yeah, I wanted to talk about the structure of minimum wage. And hi, sorry, I don't know who you are. Adrisa. Adrisa Banos. Maybe that's too far away. I can't read, but thank you. Thank you for the thumbs up. Yeah, so India has a very interesting minimum wage system, that again only acknowledges tea farm workers that are working for centralized production plantations, or sorry, I can't read that. And so yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the minimum wage there, which is broken down. Okay, so the 1948 Minimum Wage Act. So that was shortly after independence. The Minimum Wage Act was passed, and then just last year in August, so about 6 months ago, there was an additional minimum wage law that passed that made 176 Indian rupees, about $3, made that like the official minimum wage. But there's a but here. Each state is allowed to set their own minimum wage, which is interesting. So, let's see. Well, here we go. So these different categories of minimum wage that are allowable are all based on level of income, the paying capacity. So I guess this is level of income of the employer, paying capacity of the employer, prices of essential commodities, productivity, and then the local conditions. So those are like pretty like variable factors that can be very different in every place, and also subjective too. So it really does depend on how that local state, which a lot of times is influenced by the industry. So that's like lobbyists, or even bureaucrats that are in cahoots with members of industry. It could be a very subjective viewpoint of what you would consider to be um, those factors, right? So then in 1957, there was the Indian Labor Conference, which set these new standards. So the minimum wage, at least 20% of these wages, it has to be enough to cover minimum food requirement, which is 2,700 calories a day per adult. How you set the cost of that, seems very incredibly hard. Clothing requirements 72 yards per year per family. Rent according to the minimum area provided by the government's industrial housing scheme. And then miscellaneous expenditures, fuel, lighting, etc. So 20% of the wages must be enough to cover those things. So then you have another 80% that's to cover these other things. So another 25% has to cover children's education, medical needs, minimum recreation, so festivals and ceremonies, provisions for old age, and provisions for marriage. Um, so, yeah, that means that 45% of your minimum wage is just to cover those minimal things, which means there's only a 55% of your wage that is entitled to laborers in India. So it's really interesting. It's very subjective. It could be variable place to place, and so and then also for the sector of tea, there are additional requirements for an employer, so that would be a plantation or a factory, that they're allowed to have a lower minimum wage. So I was trying to look for the documents to get the exact, final. Let me look it up now. The final or the current minimum wage for each state, which for, here we go. So let's look. West Bengal, which is where Darjeeling is located. Is 269. Yeah, but that's not right. That's so funny. This document has changed. Tea farm workers is not here. So tea farm workers, on this document, it used to be a separate. This one's just saying the minimum. Let's see, Assam. Yeah, it's not saying tea farm workers. So Assam's 208, which is higher than that other one. But I know tea farm workers has a special minimum wage in all of these states that's even lower than these. But they justify it by requiring those employers to provide additional social services to cover these other things. So to cover healthcare, to cover childcare, to cover housing. And so that's why you see a lot of these plantations, even fair trade certified plantations, that have so many social programs. Bye, Pan. Have a good rest. Thanks for tuning in today. There are so many social programs plugged into the plantation system, which turns it into essentially an indentured system. Indentured labor is when you have labor that you pay, but you pay them just enough to keep them there, right? So a little bit different than slave labor. Slave labor is unpaid. And you own that labor. That doesn't happen in India. That, as far as I know, it's not happening in any tea producing community, which is a good thing. But indentured labor is a very extreme um, thing that's happening all over the tea world. So, my soapbox in regards to indentured labor, even when you are providing, because that's going to be the first thing that the plantations tell you, is but we provide them all these great resources. We're providing these schools that they wouldn't have access to this type of stuff if they were just living in the countryside themselves. And that's not necessarily true. They may not be exactly the way that the plantations are providing them, but with autonomy and dignity and a fair exchange of value, people even in the most rural parts of the world have access to these types of things. Um, and There's a lot to be said about autonomy and independence in relation to labor. And I'm a strong believer of that. Just like I'm a strong um, believer that charity is not the answer. I don't believe in charity. I don't believe in charity. I don't support charity. I do support a lot of the messaging and awareness and kind of the advocacy that goes on with charity. And so you'll see me involved in nonprofits and charity and those types of ways. But I'd much rather put my energy in towards empowering somebody to find their own autonomy and independence versus handing something out to them, which, ultimately only makes me feel better in the interim and doesn't, really empower that person to build a better future for themselves. And so, yeah, I think in labor, uh, autonomy is very important. That's why I'm not in a rush to have a bunch of employees. I'd rather empower other people to be their own business and to create their own value. And whatever I create is going to empower that, then that whole system. And so that's the whole system of distributed entrepreneurship that I advocate for, which I have been writing about. So there will be, something publishing on that. Still waiting on some results, before I publish the full white paper. But it's all related to this concept that independence and autonomy, are an important part of the exchange of value with labor. It's not just money, it's not just social services and all of these things. I think that element of dignity is really important. Just like with the restaurants that we're talking about, servers in a restaurant, empowering them with their own dignity and their own ability and skills that they could then take and create their own future with and better their own future with is a whole lot more valuable than just money. Especially a system where the money is dependent on tips versus this is the value you added to my business and this is how much I'm going to pay you. Like, that is a very entrepreneurial and empowering exchange that happens. And that doesn't really happen in the restaurant business. It doesn't really happen in the service business. It's like, I acknowledge that you give me value, but this is all I can afford to pay you for that value, which is in a lot of cases minimum wage. And then, the burden of getting the value for that labor comes to the consumer, which is cool. I'm not anti-tipping. There's some people that are very anti-tipping and feel like there are some demeaning origins of the concept of tipping. But like, for your entire livelihood to be dependent upon that, and for the business that is you're actually giving your value to not be empowered enough to provide that value back to you, it's just, yeah, I think is a very broken system. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what evolves from this. Not to say that there's not going to be pain involved. There's going to be a lot of pain. There's currently a lot of pain. But, you know, with every down, there's also, a great opportunity for, the upward swing and the progress to happen. So that's, what I wanted to share today. And I've been going on for over an hour now. So I think I'm going to sign out soon. But happy May Day to all of you, whatever that means for you. Happy spring, happy change of weather, happy productivity if you are out in your gardens getting your hands in the soil and learning how to provide for yourself. I salute your efforts and your labor to do that for yourself and encourage you all to do that. And, maybe not just today, but definitely today because of May Day, I encourage you to think about the labor behind everything in your life, every product that you consume, especially the tea, but your food and your housing and everything that's around you. Don't be afraid to ask questions about that effort and labor needed to create those things and um, what you can better do to acknowledge that. Be it through your buying dollars or through your consuming dollars or your own work yourself. So with that, I'm going to sign off. Hope you guys all have a beautiful, lovely weekend, and I'll see you again on Monday. Cheers.